Amy, let me tell you about a magical place that is so exactly designed to be enclosed space, year-round fun for the whole family that I bet you already know what I'm going to say before I even say the name. Let's say it together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Great Wolf Lodge. You got it, Amy.
My kids loved Great Wolf Lodge when we went. You probably already know that it has a huge indoor water park with a wave pool, lazy river, a bunch of massive water slides. But then your pack can hit the other attractions because, wait, there's more.
Great Wolf Lodge has adventure-packed attractions like Magi Quest, a live-action game kids can play throughout the lodge, plus the Northern Lights Arcade. Spent some quality time there, so your kid who loves the lazy river and your kid who loves fantasy games will both have a great time.
Great Wolf Lodge also offers great dining options and complimentary daily events like nightly dance parties, all under one roof. Unpack the car once and you're settled in to have fun. And with 22 lodges across the country, you're always a short drive away from adventure.
We've both had such great times at Great Wolf Lodge, so bring your pack together at a lodge near you. Learn more at greatwolf.com and strengthen the pack. Hello and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, laughing in the face of motherhood. This is Margaret, and today I am talking to Debra Hendrickson, MD. She is a board-certified pediatrician practicing in Reno, Nevada. She is the author of The Air They Breathe, a book on climate change's impacts on children. She is a clinical professor of pediatrics at the University of Nevada School of Medicine, where she lectures on how early childhood experiences, such as poverty and trauma, affect long-term health. Welcome, Dr. Hendrickson.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about what brought you to this work. You've had a career in pediatrics and teaching, and what made you want to talk about climate change and kind of the nexus of that with children's health?
Well, actually, before I went to medical school, I was an environmental analyst and planner for 10 years, so I had a background in environmental science. And then about 10 years ago here in Reno, where I live, we're the fastest warming city in the U.S. And we started to have these smoke crises with a lot of smoke from the California wildfires coming down over the city. And I started to see the impacts on kids in my clinic. And I write about that in the book as well. And it was really during one of the first of these, of course, we didn't know it was just the first of many we were going to experience, but it was during one of the first of these when I was listening to a little girl struggling to breathe, and she looked up at me, and I just was really struck by here was my two worlds coming together, because I knew it was the impact of climate change that was causing these giant fires, and that there's been a lot of studies now that have confirmed that. And it just motivated me to do something about it.
When we talk about impacts for children's health, you talk about many of them in the book. What are some of the leading things that you see in children in terms of, you talked about asthma already. I mean, we all know kids had asthma and we've always heard about asthma. Is it getting worse? What are you seeing?
During the wildfire events, when there are these events where there's a lot of smoke, yes, you definitely see an uptick in visits to the office of kids who have asthma and even kids who don't have asthma. But it is more of a problem for kids who have asthma, definitely. And we're also seeing ozone go up, which is the main component of smog in cities. And that is suspected to actually be a contributing factor to causing asthma in kids. So the more they're exposed to pollutants, the higher the rates of asthma. Yeah, and I should say that this isn't just climate change. Fossil fuels in general do this. Even if they weren't causing the world to get warmer and making some of these air quality problems worse, like wildfire smoke and smog, just the air pollution from fossil fuels has all these same problems.
And is this something that people are listening and they're like, well, I don't live near a city, or I don't live in Reno, like I don't live in California. I hear about the wildfires, but this isn't something that's affecting me.
Yeah, well, the smoke, as we saw last year in New York City, Chicago.
We got it here. We couldn't see the hand in front of our face from the Canadian fires.
Right. And if you look at NASA satellites, the smoke, the particulates, they diffuse, and so you don't realize that you're being exposed, but they spread across the whole country, even if they're coming from here. We just get the brunt of it. But there's also heat impacts, so heat illness, because everywhere across the country this year saw record high temperatures. There's the trauma of natural disasters, like the hurricane in Houston this year that then wiped out the grid so during a heat wave, and so they were exposed not just to the damage from the hurricane, but lack of electricity for air conditioning. There's infectious diseases that are rising. So we've all evolved in this environment that's been very stable for a long time, and now it's changing rapidly. So it's a risk to everybody, but it's a special risk for kids.
And let's talk about that. You talk in the book about how children are more susceptible. Let's take, for example, to pollution as one of the impacts of climate change. And it makes sense. And you say in the book, just as an adult dose of medicine would harm a child, the same adult dose of air might be problematic for a child, that we are experiencing this differently as adults than children.
Right. Young developing bodies are especially vulnerable to any kind of environmental injury, like all the things we just talked about. So like toxins in the air are one of those. And so let's just take the wildfire smoke as an example, since I know that one really well. The main pollutant in smoke is particulate pollution. And these are these tiny specks of soot and liquid droplets that are generated by the fires. They're also in fossil fuel emissions, but they're often stuck to either toxic chemicals or heavy metals. And the smaller they are, the more invasive they are. So they obviously inflame the lungs, but they also can pass through the lungs and get to any organ of the body. So in a young child, they breathe faster, so they're going to take in more air per pound than we do. They have more lung surface area per pound than we do. And the same amount is therefore more for them than it is for us. And because their organs are still developing, the lungs are still developing, the brain is still developing, 80% of lung growth is after birth. So we know that kids who chronically inhale particulate pollution end up with smaller, stunted lungs. And if you take the kids who are living in those heavily polluted neighborhoods and then move them to a clean air neighborhood, their lung growth can increase 10 to 12% just from breathing clean air. So there's all kinds of ways that kids are very susceptible, but it has mainly to do with their physiology, their size, and the fact that their organs are still developing.
And let's talk about something else you talk about in the book, which is allergies and the rise. You say that we hear year after year, oh, this is the worst allergy season on record. Right. We hear the 100-year storm that now happens seemingly 6 or 7 times a year. And
exactly.
So allergies and how that affects children.
Allergens are becoming more potent and spreading to more areas because plants, of course, are affected by the rising temperature, and they're also responding to rising carbon dioxide. So ragweed is the best example. Ragweed has proliferated across the world. It's spreading into areas where it was previously not so common. And the actual protein that causes ragweed allergy, so ragweed causes like hay fever, basically, in the spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You hear ragweed on the TV when they do the allergy commercials. It's like, oh, ragweed.
Right, exactly. So the protein itself is becoming more potent, more triggering of allergies. So we're seeing that rise, and also food allergies. There's this thing called food allergy pollen syndrome, where there's a cross reaction between certain plant pollens and certain foods. So kids who have this, they might have like a pollen allergy that then when they eat a certain food, all of a sudden their mouth starts to tingle and their lips swell. And it's this cross reaction to pollen. And that also has increased dramatically in recent years. And it's being attributed largely to climate change.
Okay, so we've heard a lot of news from Dr. Hendrickson about what's going wrong out there. And we're going to turn when we come back and start to talk a little bit about our role in all of this and how we can be effective parents during this time. I'm talking to Debra Hendrickson, MD, and she is the author of The Air They Breathe. And we'll be right back.
Hellions, it's time for some spring cleaning, and I don't just mean the coat closets. Doing your financial spring cleaning can actually be super easy when you let Monarch do your financial spring cleaning for you. One dashboard that gets your entire financial life organized. No more clutter, no more mess, no more logins scattered everywhere, just accounts, investments, property, and more, all in one place. Get your first year of Monarch for half off, just $50 with promo code FRESH. Monarch allows you to look not only at what you've already spent, but also to plan for the future. With Monarch, you can set savings goals, plan for big purchases, and notice spending trends before they become a problem. I can generate cash flow reports that show me what we spent this quarter, this month, what we're probably going to spend next month, and feel prepared, organized, and knowing how to plan for the future. No more surprises and a lot more clarity. Try Monarch. Use code FRESH at monarch.com to get your first year half off at just $50. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code FRESH.
So I think as moms, we have a lot on our plate, a lot we're worrying about. And as we start to think about these huge picture things, we talk a lot on the podcast about sometimes it feels like systems are operating that are so much larger than ourselves. And then it kind of becomes like, well, mom, you let them watch screens. And it's like, wait a minute, the whole world is designed around screens. These algorithms are designed to keep our kids engaged with screens no matter what. And somehow it's my fault that my kid is watching too much screens. So I think that this issue of climate change and children's health, how do we hear this as individual mothers who are concerned about our children's health? And we haven't really talked about the fact that this disproportionately affects poorer children. How do we start to see our role in this whole giant thing that sometimes feel like, okay, I'm washing out my strawberry container as much as I can, but what else can I do about this? Because this all feels scary to me.
Well, there's two big categories of things we can do. One is called sustainability, and that's what we do to try to keep things from getting worse. And the other is adaptation. That's what we do to protect our kids from what's already happening. So sustainability is basically about trying to make everything electric and powered by renewable energy. And with that one, I always think of it as thinking of yourself as the center of a bunch of spheres. And at the center of it is your own house, your own transportation, your own life, and any small things you can do. Anything you do is better than doing nothing, is my attitude. And talk to other people you know, share what you know, form a community around this. That really helps too. But the next sphere out is your community. So talking to people like at your kid's school. There's a big program now. There's $5 billion available to change school buses to electric school buses. So that's something that benefits the school district. They're cheaper to operate and it lowers emissions. There are other programs to try to get the school buildings themselves to be zero emissions, and solar panels and heat pumps instead of traditional HVAC systems. And the kids can get involved in this too. And that also helps lower the emissions from the school. And then you can go out to your city.
Yeah. And you tell some stories in the book about kids who do get involved in this work. Our school, there's a lot of posters and like our green selves and poster making and stuff. But I like the examples of the book that are more action-oriented than poster-making oriented, which sometimes this activity seems to be.
I think you're right. And I think sometimes there's this category of just trying to make ourselves feel better, but not really achieving very much.
Yes.
So I try to focus on what are we really doing to reduce carbon with any of these actions. And that's the big focus for any sustainability. I think the big ticket item in most communities, though it's not very interesting, is the Public Utilities Commission. They're making big decisions every day about how you're getting your electricity, where it's coming from. So it's a lot of arcane meetings, and not a whole lot of fun to get into, but it's really important for how much emissions each town and each state is producing. In terms of adaptability, and I should mention, I have a 2-page handout that if you have notes, I can attach it for people with a list.
Oh, absolutely. We'll put that in the show notes.
So adaptability for like the heat wave we just had, you want to be really careful that kids are getting enough water, getting shade breaks, try to do errands in the morning, all the obvious things. If your kids are in sports, get a wet bulb globe thermometer or have the coach have one to be sure you know what the actual heat impact is, because it's not just temperature, but sun exposure, wind, humidity, all these things go into.
Right. I know about wet bulb thermometers because my son had to take the Earth Science Regents last year. So I know about wet bulb thermometers. But for people who don't, the idea is that you can feel the heat. It might be 91 degrees outside, but that's not factoring in what kind of factors.
Yeah, humidity, sunlight, and wind. They're not super cheap, but like $100 to a couple $100. But I think it is important for coaches, if your kids are involved in sports at school, to have one and be aware of the risk. And a lot of coaches here are moving practices to really early in the morning to try to avoid the peak of the day, and that's good. Make sure your kids' coaches are aware of the danger and that they're not just trying to make the kids think that not drinking water is a sign of toughness or not taking breaks,
That's a really interesting point. My husband is a Texan and they have, a lot of Texas football and they practice in the summers. And this is how the kids before us did it. And this is how we toughen up kids is 2-a-days in 100-degree heat. And I think the pushback is starting. And I think sometimes it feels like, well, we did it this way and then our kids should have to do, it's like frat hazing or something, like you got to do what the people before you did. But the book points out that circumstances are changing, that perhaps 25 years ago, doing a 2-a-day on a warm Texas day was doable, but that now is becoming something that might actually be very physically dangerous.
That's exactly right, because the trend of athletes becoming sick with heat exhaustion and heat illness is going up. So that's something to really be careful about. And having some kind of cooling tub on the field, especially for football players, is important too.
I guess this is happening on every level. It's happening on an individual level, which is like, I don't want to send my kid to a practice where they're going to be in danger from the heat. Then it's happening on a community level of, we understand the value of sports is second to the safety of the kids playing those sports. And then it's happening on some larger governmental level where people are somehow making decisions that are hopefully eliminating more carbon.
Yeah, that's the goal. And one of the reasons I wrote the book is that, obviously everybody knows about climate change and a lot of parents are anxious about it, especially here when we have week after week of smoke. It really gets to people. And I kind of think of parents as the sleeping giant of this fight, because I think if they really understood the urgency of this decade, because all the models show that if we can cut carbon emissions in half this decade, it gives us a chance of keeping the ultimate peak of warming, which is what our kids are going to inherit. It avoids the worst. And studies have shown it's possible. We have all the technology we need to make that change. And Stanford did a study 2 years ago that showed that economically you could do it and you'd actually save trillions of dollars in damages if all these countries cooperated. So I kind of think of it like World War II or something where everybody banded together and made this a goal. And I think for our kids' sake, that's really how we have to think about it, is it's just something that has to be done.
And we think of all of the things that we're doing for our kids. And this one is a big one, although I understand, for having been a mom with 3 kids under 4 and just trying to get through the day with keeping my head up, that to somehow take on global warming feels like, this too, it feels huge.
I have 3 kids too. I know. I remember. There are some things though that don't take too much. Like here in Nevada, we have a green power program where you just a couple clicks of your mouse, you don't have to do anything to your house. And it's like $1.50 a month. You can just ask to get all your electricity from renewable sources. And there are a lot of states that have this, but they don't advertise it very much. And like I said, anything you can do, even if it's just trying to reduce your plastic consumption, because plastics come from petrochemicals also, it all helps.
Yeah, and it's a worthy endeavor, as you show. I am talking to Dr. Debra Hendrickson, and she is the author of The Air They Breathe, and we'll be right back.
All my kids learned to swim when they were little. It was super important to me that they be confident and safe in the water. There was only one problem with that: taking them to swim lessons. I mean, the pools were freezing. There were always cranky adults doing laps right there. And it was definitely not, for any of us, what you would call fun.
Amy, heard. But now there's Goldfish Swim School. Goldfish takes a really thoughtful approach to swim lessons, combining research-based teaching with a warm, kid-friendly environment that actually helps kids thrive in the water.
Every detail at Goldfish is thoughtfully designed to create a golden experience, from shiver-free, warm indoor pools to comfy waiting areas for parents to professionally trained lifeguards on deck.
Goldfish uses an approach called the science of swim play, which combines guided play with proven teaching techniques to help kids learn to swim, build water safety skills, and gain confidence, all at their own pace. Lessons are designed to meet kids exactly where they're at.
If you've been thinking about swim lessons or just wondering where to start, this is a great opportunity. Right now, Goldfish Swim School is offering a waived membership plus your child's first lesson free at participating locations.
Just visit goldfishswimschool.com/free to find a location near you and enroll using promo code FREE.
That's goldfishswimschool.com/free, promo code FREE.
Let's continue turning to these kind of solutions. We're talking about the health effects that this is having on children. And we touched on it in the last segment, but I think sometimes also people feel like with climate change, like, we missed the boat already. Like, it's too late. I guess this is our fate. And they feel kind of complacent in that way. So what do you say to people who kind of coming from that place?
Yeah, and I get asked a lot, are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Which is a variation of this, right? And I've sort of come to think that that's not the right way to think about it because, and I sort of allude to this in the book, I've worked with a lot of parents whose kids have gotten really terrible diagnoses, things they've had to confront, like cancer, diabetes, head injuries. And we don't ever think about those things that way. No matter what background or education or income a person has, parents never give up on their kids. They just figure out what they need to do and they fight for them. And I think there's a real parallel to this, that there isn't really a choice. We have to band together and do something about this. It's as important as car seats, brushing their teeth, taking them in for checkups. And I think it's also really important to realize that that kind of helpless feeling, that despair, that's actually a strategy of the industry, the oil and gas industry.
Oh, that's interesting. Say more about that. That's interesting. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, there's a whole book written about this by one of the most prominent climate scientists in the world, Michael Mann. It's called The New Climate War. And he details this, that they shifted from, because they knew 50 years ago that this was going to happen. Their own scientists predicted it. They did all this research. And then they shifted into denialism and started undermining the public's faith in the science. When that became impossible, they've shifted to doomism, which is to convince us all that it's
right. It's too late. Oh, well.
It's too late. It's hopeless. And you'll see all kinds of stuff if you do Twitter or social media. It's all over there. And that is just not true. Every 10th of a degree that we prevent rise matters for the quality of life that we are passing on to our kids. And we know that if we stopped adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, the Earth actually would stop warming in 3 to 5 years. That's what the modeling shows. So there's a lot we can do. There's just a huge revolution of clean energy right now. The Inflation Reduction Act set off really an explosion of new manufacturing of clean energy in the United States, and it's just getting started. But that should end up cutting the U.S.'s emissions by 40% once it's fully implemented. And that's a very hopeful thing. China is meeting its deadlines for renewable energy 6 years ahead of schedule, and the EU has also made progress. So there's progress happening all over. And if you notice yourself feeling kind of despairing, just remember that that's how the industry wants you to feel, because they want to continue to pull in their profits.
Let's talk about talking to our kids about climate. I think that some kids are super read into this, and it can be very anxiety producing. And I definitely notice we go to the aquarium, let's say, and it's like, here's the beautiful penguin. And we learn all about the penguin. And at the end, they're like, plastics are killing the penguin. And it has a little bit of like, oh, yeah, this is, upsetting. And so how do we talk? I mean, I know some kids who have extreme anxiety about climate change and warming. And how do you suggest talking to kids about this issue so that we're helping them feel a little bit more empowered?
Kids have anxiety about it, and adults, parents too.
For sure.
So I think the thing to focus on is action. Action kind of lifts us out of that feeling of anxious, despairing, and talking to others. I belong to this group of pediatricians from across the country that we meet every month. We talk about what each of us is doing in our clinics and hospitals and what we've been doing to help parents understand and what they can do. And just that bonding together with other people who are also concerned and coming up with some action you can do, it just lifts you out of that. And I tell the story in the book of that one little girl in New York who had this issue, and it really helped her. She started her own little website. And so, the goal is not to scare kids so much. Obviously, it's a scary topic. But to tell them that we're all going to fight for this. We're all going to get together. We're going to do, what can we do? What can we do tomorrow? Could we go, even if it's just something that seems small, like let's go plant a tree. Let's go. It just helps the kids feel like they're doing something and not sink into that anxiety.
Yeah, and I think it is something that I see being woven a lot into the fabric of my kids' education and my community. I also live in the Northeast, which is a somewhat more liberal area. There may be areas of the country where people find this kind of work or conversation or finding community around climate more challenging. Although I suppose that Reno, Nevada is maybe one of those communities. It's not the bluest state in the world. Is this something that you find people have trouble connecting in certain areas?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is kind of the swing county in a swing state. So it's kind of purple. We have this mutual goal of what's best for the kids. And I think that we can talk to each other that way. Like the people from more conservative towns, the little towns around here, they still love the land and they care about the land and they care about their kids. And so I think we just have to connect on that level and approach clean energy and the solutions to this in that way. And you have to consider why this divide exists too, because this is another thing that the industry has poured billions, literally billions of dollars into. to promulgate this idea that somehow clean energy is worse for the environment than oil and gas drilling. But that doesn't mean your neighbor, you can't talk to him and have a conversation and share certain values and goals.
For sure. And in terms of tangible items, which we were talking a little bit about before, you talk about eliminating gas-powered appliances. So talk a little bit about what that looks like.
So in a home, that's like an induction stove instead of a gas stove, a solar-powered or heat pump-powered water heater, and dryer instead of gas-powered. So all the appliances, sort of taking a mental inventory of all the appliances in your house that are gas-powered is a good way to start, and just thinking about what you can do. Now, it is a little more complicated in some places because you have to sometimes get a bigger amp board to support all this. It'll depend on your house, and you'll have to talk to your utility and an electrician. This is one reason why it's really important for new building codes to think about this in advance and be building these houses so they can support these things. But if you're in the market for a new car, getting an electric car, or if you don't drive, trying to take public transportation.
Yeah, lots of like good, small, practical ways to move the needle for ourselves. And as you said, that's what takes the anxiety away, is making ourselves feel a little bit empowered versus just constantly terrified.
Exactly.
Seems sometimes like the other option.
No, I know.
I want to close with this quote from the book, which I think sums up the work really well. I hope we can all do something small but meaningful. When we pack our kids' lunches, help them with homework, or kiss them on the forehead, I hope we can notice the air around us. Take a deep breath, pull it into ourselves. Pay attention to how it feels. Have our children do the same. Unplug them and go outside. Reconnect them to their bodies and physical reality. Teach them not with words, but with experiences to be mindful of their place in the tapestry. And that, to me, that struck me as this is the work. I see you, Mom, who's out there being like, I can't write a letter to Congress. I don't have it in me. But I like this idea that a lot of the work is just connecting kids to the world and air and like the breath of air and understanding that is connected to our behaviors.
Yeah, that's something we didn't really touch upon, but the whole opening of the book is that whole idea that we aren't really separate from the environment. We're part of it. And so when our kids take a breath, they're pulling the atmosphere into their bodies. When they exhale, they're exhaling their own breath into the atmosphere. When you take a drink of water, you're drinking the atmosphere, which then passes through them and eventually returns back to the clouds and the sea. We evolved in this world. We're part of it. And everything we do to it, we're doing also to children. And that's why it's so important that we do everything we can to protect it for them.
So important. I really enjoyed this conversation. The book is The Air They Breathe by Dr. Debra Hendrickson. And tell us where people can find more resources and more about your work.
I have a website, debrahendrickson.com, which is mainly about the book. The American Academy of Pediatrics has a website called healthychildren.org, and it has a section about climate change with lots of articles and things parents can do. And there's other books and resources, but those are probably good places to start.
Fantastic. And we will link to all of that in the show notes of this episode. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
Thank you.